Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm going to be starting a new series on the saints. Every month I'm going to pick at least one saint to research and learn about, and then I'm going to come on here and share my information with you. The first saint that I am choosing is going to be Saint Joan of Arc, and this is an exciting saint for me to talk about for two reasons. One, it's the month of May. Saint Joan of Arc's feast day is May 30th, so I'm going to post this video on May 30th. And secondly, that is the saint that I chose to be my saint when I was consecrated. So I'm super excited to start off with Saint Joan of Arc, and the fact that it falls within the month is just really neat. So I'm going to get started. Saint Joan of Arc was believed to be born January 6, 1412. She died May 30th, 1431 at the age of only 19 years old. Like I said, her feast day is May 30th, which is the anniversary of her death. She is the patron saint of prisoners, women soldiers, soldiers in general, but especially women, people that have a high piety for God, as well as rape victims in the country of France. Now we're going to get into a Reader's Digest version of the life of Saint Joan of Arc. Saint Joan of Arc was the youngest of 5 children in Champagne, France, and she lived during the war between England and France known as the 100-Year War. Saint Joan of Arc, also known as the Maid of Orleans, came from a very devoted household to God. It is recorded that she began hearing voices as well as seeing visions by the age of 13 years old. These voices became known to her as the Council because she heard from a variety of different voices, such as Saint Michael the Archangel, Saint Catherine, Saint Margaret, as well as other voices as well. It is through these visions that Saint Joan started to be encouraged to support Saint Charles VII. I just want to pause for a second and acknowledge the confusion, or maybe this being scared of the fact that somebody was claiming that they were hearing voices at that time, let alone our time. I mean, nowadays, if somebody were to say, oh, I hear from God, some people are going to think they're absolutely crazy. So I think it's important to just acknowledge how wild that was for her to claim that, and for the reactions that she probably experienced even at a young age. Eventually, God's call in Saint Joan's life just kept getting stronger and stronger to the point that it became like an urgent call. I'm not sure if any of you have had this experience before where you feel like God is calling you to something and it just gets to the point where you just can't ignore it and you have to take action. But this is kind of what seems to have happened in Saint Joan of Arc's life. Like many of the saints, Saint Joan of Arc knew that God was calling her to an extraordinary mission. Now, I'm going to get a little historic on you, so please don't fall asleep on me, but it's important to understand to truly grasp Saint Joan of Arc's story. So by the age of 16, Saint Joan of Arc knew that God was calling her to go help Dauphin Charles VII in his mission to retake France. The word Dauphin means the eldest son of a king, and in this situation, it was the King of France. Charles VII was the heir to the throne of France at the time. So apparently at this time, Charles VII had to get to Reims, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but Reims, in order for him to take the throne as king. But at this time, England had control over that land, so it created an issue for him. A key story in Saint Joan of Arc's life is when Charles VII tested Saint Joan of Arc. He did this by surrounding himself in a group of men and not identifying himself as the Dauphin or the heir. And he made her basically pick him out of the crowd to prove herself as really sent by God. The cool thing is she did it. So by the grace of God and the help of the council or the voices that were guiding her, she was able to identify who he was without any sort of identification, and it just really went to show him that she was sent by God. And after that point, it is believed that he had full faith in her just as much as she had full faith that he was supposed to be the heir to the throne. Eventually, Saint Joan of Arc was entrusted with leading an army, and she was even given a sword by God. Joan helped to lead many battles, and it was not until the last battle that Saint Joan of Arc got severely wounded by a crossbow. It is recorded that she refused to get off the battlefield, and they basically had to drag her off the battlefield in order for her to stop fighting. Eventually, Saint Joan of Arc was captured and sold to the English army for the price of what they would have sold a king for. You see, the English were afraid of Saint Joan, and they were trying to put her on trial for being a heretic. Unfortunately, Joan did not receive a fair trial. She was not given support to defend herself. She wasn't allowed to go to Mass. She wasn't allowed to visit with a priest. She wasn't allowed to take the Eucharist, and she wasn't allowed to go to confession. Truth is there was no actual evidence that she committed heresy. The English actually took advantage of her illiteracy, and they doctored up the paperwork, had her sign it, which eventually led to her persecution. Much like Jesus's trial, there was a lot of questioning that was used that was made to try to trap her, but with the help of her counsel, she was able to appropriately answer all the questions. Regardless of St. Joan of Arc's innocence, she was eventually convicted and sentenced to death. On May 30th, 1431, Joan was taken in front of a crowd, tied to a scaffold, and she was put to death. She had actually asked two priests to hold a crucifix up for her while she was being executed. And one of the soldiers constructed a cross for her that was affixed to her dress. Let it be known that Saint Joan of Arc cried out to Jesus as she perished and took her last breath. It's stories like these that really put into perspective the little strifes I deal with on a day-to-day basis, and really reflect on what it means to pick up your cross and follow Christ. It wasn't until years later that St. Joan of Arc case was requested to be on retrial by the request of St. Joan of Arc's mother. The request was investigated, and the verdict was St. Joan of Arc was actually a martyr and was persecuted under false pretenses of being a heretic, which is a scary reality of anchoring the wrong people in power, even today. It wasn't until 1909 that she was beatified, and in 1920 she was canonized by Pope Benedict XV, making her the patron saint of prisoners, soldiers, especially women, people being ridiculed for their piety towards God, rape victims, as well as the country of France. Thank you so much for taking the time to stick through this video and learn a little bit more about your Catholic faith, and particularly St. Joan of Arc. And a fun little story before this video ends is I went pretty far to get this footage of the statue of St. Joan of Arc. And when I got there, I had already fully charged my battery, and I started recording. And no lie, in 15 seconds, my battery had died. And I'm not sure if you caught it in the initial footage that I showed, but within those 15 seconds, I captured a cute little bird that flew right in front of me and the statue, which I just think is kind of amazing considering I only recorded for 15 seconds. And an English soldier and an English... And an English, this is so hard to say, and an English, and an English soldier, it's like a tongue twister, and an English soldier. All right, your turn. Say English soldier 5 times fast.